So this overloading is nothing but please mute your audio. So overloading is nothing but creating more than one method with same name. That means you will be defining two or more methods, but the names will be same. Their type signature may be different. So first let me tell you about the type signature. So every method that we define in a class, it will have something called a type signature. In Java, we'll use a term called type signature. So what is this type signature means? So we have discussed prototypes, right, for methods, functions with parameter, without parameter, with return value and without return value, all these things. So similarly in Java, method will have different number of parameters and different types of parameters, and it may or may not return a value. So if it is not returning a value, then its return type will be mentioned as void, right? And if it is returning any value, then the return type will be the data type of that particular value. If it is a string value, then the return type will be a string. If it is an integer value, the return type will be int. If it is a floating point value that is being returned, then the return type will be float. So in that way, whatever type of value you are passing or you are returning to the calling method, that will be the return type of this called method, right? So we'll use a term called type signature to refer to these entities, the types of parameters and the number of parameters that you're going to pass to a method, and the return type of the method. So instead of using something called prototypes, function prototypes, which we use the term in C language, in Java we use a term called type signature. So you can create methods with same name but different type signatures. Means like, say for example, uh, I want to define a method called area, right? I want to define one more method with same name area. So when you want to do this way, you want to define more than one method with the same name, their type signatures must be different. Type signature means what? Either the number of parameters or the type of the parameters. It must be different, or even the return type some cases. Say for example, uh, if this first version of int receives two parameters like this, and second version receives only one parameter, say x. If you look at these two methods, their names are same. The name of that method is area, right? But for the first version you have two integer parameters, whereas for the second version you have only one integer parameter. So in that way, the number of parameters may differ, or the type of parameters may also differ. So I can define one more method with the same name, say int, so say area, but the parameters that I'm going to pass may also be same. That means the number of parameters, but their type may be different, like this. So now totally you have three versions of area method, right? So the first version receives two parameters. Even the second version receives, sorry, third version also receives two parameters. But look at the types of parameters. For the first version, it has two parameters. Both are of type integer, and third version has also two parameters, but both the parameters are of type double, right? And coming to the second version, it has only one parameter. Similarly, I can create one more method with same name area like this, and one of them may be say integer, the other one may be a double value like this. So in that way you can create as many number of methods as you want, but they must at least differ in the number of parameters or the type of the parameters. You cannot define method with same name but with same number of parameters and same type of parameters. So if I create now, for example, one more method version area, say int a. So now if you observe the second version that we created, the name of the method is area, and how many parameters it receives? It receives only one parameter, right? Then it receives what is the type of that one parameter? Integer. And look at the last version, the name of the method is same area. The number of parameters is also same as that of the second version, and even the type of the parameter is also same. The second version is having int and this last version is also having int. Second version is receiving only one integer parameter, even the last version is also receiving one integer parameter. So you cannot define this last version because already with the same type signature you have another version of area. So this will not be permitted, right? So this will be wrong. This is not permitted, right? So without matching the number of parameters and type of the parameters, we can create as many versions as you want, as long as you differ them with their type signature. Okay, so this concept is called as overloading. So what is overloading? Overloading is a process of defining more than one method with same name in the same class but with different type signatures. So how will the Java runtime environment know which method you are calling, because their names are same, right? When you create an object for that class and when you try to call this area method, because there are multiple versions of that method, which one will be called, that will be resolved during runtime depending on the number of parameters you are passing to that method and the type of parameters you are passing to the method. Say for example, you are passing only one parameter, you're passing only one parameter, then out of all these versions, the four versions that we defined, which one is having only one parameter? The second one is having only one parameter. So this method will be invoked when you try to call this area method using the object of the class in which this area method is defined with only one parameter. If you try to call the area method with two parameters, then you have two methods, two versions with two parameters. So the first version receives two parameters and even the third version also receives two parameters. But look at the data type of those parameters of the first version. Both are integer for first version and both are double for the third version. So if you call the method area with two parameters, if both of them are integers, then the first version will be invoked. If both of them are double, then the second version will be third version will be invoked. Okay, so in that way, uh, during runtime, the method which method version to be called will be resolved by the Java runtime system based on the number of parameters and the type of parameters you are passing to that method during the call to that method. Okay, so this is called as overloading. And this overloading can also be done with constructors, because constructors are also one type of special methods, right? So that way, in that way, if you create multiple constructors in your program, multiple constructors in your program with different types of parameters. We call this as constructor overloading. So overloading is of two types based on whether you are overloading the or ordinary methods of a class or the constructors of a class. If you are overloading ordinary methods of a class, then that is called as method overloading. If you are overloading constructors, then we call it as constructor overloading, right? And all these method versions are said to be overloaded. All these method versions that we define are said to be overloaded. Similarly, if you are overloading constructors, all those versions of the constructors are said to be overloaded. Okay, so let us define a program now. Let us create a program now implementing method overloading. అదే బుడ్డి శ్వేత లేచాడు. So let me show execution. So look at the errors. In line number 19 you have an error, and in line number 31 you have another error. So what is error description for line number 19? Method area is already defined in class areas. And what is error in 31? Error void type not allowed here. So why this error is coming? Because how many times this area method is defined? Two versions are created, right? Area, and this is also another area. But look at the return type of this one, void, and return type of this one is area. So we cannot say that these two methods are overloaded. Okay, so overloading means we need to overloading depends on the parameters, the number of parameters and type of parameters. It is not much dependent on the return type of the method. See, though it is the return type of this area method is void, and return type of this area method is double, they both will not be considered as overloaded methods. Okay, so when you can consider them as overloaded method means depending on the parameters, the number of parameters and the type of the parameters. Because the number of parameters for this area method is 0, and even for this one also the number of parameters is 0, so this will not be considered as area. We cannot define two different methods with same name and with same number of parameters, as I told you earlier, right? So in this case the return type will not be will not be able to decide which method you are calling. So which will be what will be deciding at the time of at your Java runtime when you run the program? The number of parameters and the type of parameters will decide which version to be called. But here, because the number of parameters are same for both these methods, there will not be any resolution. There will be a conflict and ambiguity. So we cannot say that these are overloaded. Okay. So what we need to do? We need to we need to create only one method like this. If at all, if you want to overload these methods, then it must be like, say here one parameter you must give, say yes, and here you don't give any parameters, then that will be accepted. That will be accepted. Okay. So when you want to call this version of this area method, then you have to pass one integer parameter to this area, then this area method will be invoked. When you want to call this one, you need not pass any parameters. Okay, but in our program this will not be possible. Why? Because before we overloaded this method, that means we created multiple versions of area method, we have created two constructors for this class. Look at the constructors. How many constructors we have created? Two constructors we have created, and I have mentioned in the comment here for both the constructors as overloaded constructor. So this is permitted, you don't have any error with this, because the methods names are same, that is the constructor name will always be same as it of class name. You can create as many constructors as you want, as I told you earlier. And even I told you that day, if you create multiple constructors of your own in your class but with different number of parameters, then that concept we call it as constructor overloading, and we'll discuss about this overloading later, I told you in that class, right? So this is a time for discussing on this topic now. So first let me discuss about this constructor, overloaded constructors, then we'll go to overloaded methods. So if you observe the first constructor, this is not a default constructor, it is a parameterized constructor. So how many parameters are there? One parameter is there, that is of type double. And if you look at the second constructor, it has two parameters, both are of type double parameters. Okay, so what are these constructors doing means, the first constructor is assigning the parameter s value to the instance variable side. So why I took as parameter double value, because I want to assign this parameter s value to the variable instance variable side. Because instance variable side is of double, then even s also must be double. So that's why I took this parameter as double value, and I'm assigning this parameter s value, which is of type double, to the instance variable side, which is also a double type. Okay, so to initialize this double side where instance variable value, we are going to use this constructor. Then coming to the second constructor, what is the second constructor doing? It is initializing the other two instance variables length and breadth with L and B, where L and B are two parameters passed to this constructor. Okay, now we can say that these two constructors are overloaded because their names are same, right? But the number of parameters are differing. For the first one, there is only one parameter, and the type is same, double. And for the second one, you have two parameters. So there will not be any ambiguity or conflict while making a call to these constructors. So what is the role of this constructor in creating an object means? If you look at the main method, I've created two objects for the class areas. One is A1 and the other one is A2. When I'm creating the first object A1, I'm passing to this constructor only one parameter. So because I'm passing only one parameter, so what is the constructor that is having only one parameter? This one. So this constructor will be automatically called or invoked. So I'm passing 10 here as parameter to this constructor. Have given 10.0, which means it is a double value. So that double value 10.0 will be copied into this s, and that s value will be assigned to the instance variable side. So by creating object a1, you have initialized only the side instance variable. You have not initialized this length and breadth. Okay, so this is constructor overloading. This will work fine. But after creating these objects, when you want to make a call to a1.area, so whether this one must be called or this one must be called, there will be an ambiguity, and that ambiguity will not be resolved because both are not having any parameters. That means the number of parameters for both these versions is same, uh, which is not permitted. Overloading means what? Defining more than one versions of the same method. That means the method name must be same, but the type of parameters and the number of parameters must vary. Okay, but if you look at this, the number of parameters is same. So these cannot be called as overloaded methods. Fine. So because if I create only one method area, and instead of remove this area like this double area, I'll remove this one. If I want to print, if I want to calculate area of both square and rectangle, what is the purpose of writing this program? What is the purpose of writing this area method is to compute area. So area can be computed for a square as well as for rectangle, right? So if I try to So now there is only one version of this area method, right? But even now also, if you try to call with A1 the area method and with A2 the area method, this will not work fine. It will not work fine. Why? Because you may not get any error, but because A1 is going to initialize what? Only one instance variable, that is side, right? So when you call with A1 area method, so what is going to happen? This area method gets executed, and what is it displaying? Using system.out.println, first one is displaying area of square is side into side, because you have passed the side value as 10.0. 10 into 10 is 100, so it will display 100.0 something, right? But when you call a2 dot area, so this is going to work, this system dot this one will work fine. But coming to this second one, because a1 object is not passing any parameter to initialize the remaining two instance variables length and breadth. So what will happen to this second system dot out dot print statement? Because you didn't initialize them, what will be the default value? It will be 0. So 0 into 0 will be 0. So it may return as 0 as uh, area of rectangle. This will be compiled successfully, but when you run the program, you will not get the rectangle area. See, when you call area with a1 object, area of square will work fine, it will return 100.0, but area of rectangle will not work, it will give 0.0. Because as far as object a1 is concerned, only the instance variable side is initialized with one value, but not length and breadth. But coming to the second object a2, it is initializing only the length and breadth instance variables, but not side. So if you try to call area method using a2, so because side is not initialized, by default side value will be 0. So side into side, 0 into 0 will be 0. But because length and breadth are initialized with 10 and 15, so length into breadth means 10 into 15 is 150. So that's the reason why you're getting for first object, when you call with the first object a1 the area method, it will display square area exactly 100.0, but rectangle area it will not be displaying because a1 is not initializing the length and breadth instance variables. And when you call with a2 object, which is initializing only length and breadth but not side, so the area of square will be side into side will be 0, but area of rectangle, because you are initializing them with 15 and 10, 15 into 10 is 150, so you will get 150 here. So how to solve this problem? Instead of overloading constructors, we can define only one constructor. We can define only one constructor. And we'll pass three parameters. So those three parameters can be used to initialize all the three instance variables side, length and breadth. So now what will happen to the when you create an object, all the three instance variables will be initialized, right? And when you are creating object for this class, you cannot create objects this way, because you have one constructor with three parameters. So either you need to pass three parameters or nothing. But you are trying to pass two or one parameters, which is not correct. So now I'll pass now another parameter, say 10.0. So this will work. So I'll make this as A1 and I'll remove this last. Okay. So now when I call with A1 dot area, so side value is nothing but 10.0. So 10 into 10 will be 100. So this system dot out dot println will print the area of square as 100. And the second and third parameters 15 and 10 are length and breadth. So the second system dot out dot println will print length into breadth, that is 150. There is only one object here. Okay. So this is what you are doing here. You are simply creating only one areas, one constructor. But here we didn't use any constructor now. So will this be an example now for a constructor overloading? It will not be an example for constructor overloading because we have created only one constructor. Okay. And coming to the method, will it be a method overloading? It will not be a method overloading either because we have defined only one method with the name area. So now if you want to use method overloading, what we need to do, instead of using this constructor, I'll create two versions of area. So because I am not creating any constructor, but I am defining two methods here now. Both the method names are same, area. Double L double P. So if you look at the first version of the area method, it receives one parameter, that is of double type. And if you look at the second version of the area method, it receives two parameters and both are of type double. So now if you make a call to this area method by just passing only one parameter, then this area method will be invoked. And if you are making a call to the area method with two parameters, this will be invoked. And while creating an object for the constructor, you cannot pass these values anymore because we didn't create any parameterized constructor. So the default constructor will be used. Okay. But when you are making a call to area method, you need to pass the corresponding parameters for the area. So you have two versions here of area. One, the first version is receiving one parameter, second version is receiving two parameters. But here, are we making a call to the area method with one or two parameters? We are not calling it. So we are calling it with no parameters. But we didn't define area method with no parameters, right? So that's why let us pass it. So this will call what? The first version of area method, which is receiving only one parameter. Okay, so now when I call area method with one parameter, the first version of the area method will be invoked, this one. When I call with two parameters, the second version of the method will be called, that is this one, the second area with two parameters. So let us run this program and see. So look at the output. You're getting exactly area of square is 100 and area of rectangle is 150. So now we can call these area methods as overloaded methods. Okay, so this is overloading. Now let us check whether instead of giving double parameter, I'm going to give integer parameter this to this one. Still it works fine. Okay, so when you don't have a area method with one parameter but that is of type integer, then what will happen? This 10 will be converted into a double value, and this method with only one parameter will be called. Okay, so what matters here is the number of parameters matters here. If you are passing the number of parameters same but their values are their types are different, then whichever method is matching, that will be invoked. But if there is no matching type and number of parameters, then if the it will look only for the number of parameters and it will upgrade the data type of the parameter to that particular data type of the area method parameter, and then it will make a call to that one. If you observe here, I'm making a call to area method with one parameter, but that one parameter 10 is an integer. But do we have area version with one parameter and that is of integer? We have only two versions. The first one is with one parameter, but the type of the parameter is double here. And second one is it has two parameters, so this is not going to match with this one at all because the number of parameters is entirely different. But you have only one method version of area with only one parameter, but that parameter value is not matching. This is double and this is integer, right? So what will happen is this 10 will be upgraded to a double value, and then the method call will be resolved to this method. Okay, so what plays more important role in overloading is the number of parameters. It plays very important role. So when a when an overloaded method is called, if there is a matching version of that area method with the number of parameters, then there is no problem. But if there is no matching with the type of the parameter, with whatever type you have an area version, that is overloaded method version, that method will be invoked by upgrading the uh, value of the parameter that you passed. Okay, if you pass integer, then it will be converted into double and then it will be invoked. So that's the reason why you are getting output properly for this one. Even though we passed integer parameter, it will work fine. So now let me make this instead of double integer, int s, but here I'll try to pass a double. So look at error, incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from double to int. Why this is not happening? A lower data type value, integer is a lower data type value, double is a higher data type value. So from lower to higher you can convert, but higher to lower you cannot convert. So this is type conversion. So earlier we have given simply an integer value 10 here, but the area's one parameter is given as double. So conversion will be done from the parameter 10, which is integer type, to the parameter type of this area method is double, which is a higher data type. So lower to higher will be converted, but higher to lower will not be converted. So you know the concept of narrowing conversion and widening conversion. Narrowing conversion means what? Converting from higher data type to lower data type. Widening conversion means what? Converting from lower data type to higher data type. What will happen with this is, because this is a double value, double will occupy more amount of space, but you're trying to pass this double value to a integer parameter which will occupy less amount of space. So will it fit into that? The actually double data type requires more amount of space, memory space, right? But you are trying to store it in an integer type of parameter which will occupy less amount of space. Then what will happen is, you may lose some data, that is binary digits, in the memory's representation. As a result, the value of that parameter will completely change. So that's why Java will not permit you to convert the parameter value which is of lower type to a parameter value which is of higher type. So this will not work. So if this is double which is of higher type, and this is integer which is of lower type, so conversion must be done from integer to double, that is from lower type to higher type. So this will work because integer parameter 10 will occupy less amount of space, whereas double parameter that we declared in the method definition will occupy more amount of space. So a small value can be stored in a larger memory space, but right, so that's why it will be permitted. But if you are trying to store a larger value in a smaller space, that will not be allowed. Okay, so that is the reason this will not be permitted. So that's why you're getting an error here. What is that error? Incompatible types, possible lossy conversion. Lossy conversion means what? When you are trying to convert from one data type to another data type, that is from larger data type to lower data type, there is a possibility of losing some data which is part of your double value. So that is called as lossy conversion. So lossy conversion will not be permitted. So that's the reason that you are getting error. Okay. Uh, so now this will work because this is integer, which requires less amount of space, but the parameter here for the area method is double, which will have more amount of space. So you can store a value which requires less space in a larger space, but you cannot store a value which requires large space in a smaller space. Okay, so that's why this will work. So what you need to understand overall in the concept of method overloading is, method overloading has nothing to do with the return type, right? Whether it is void or double or int, or it doesn't matter. What matters is the number of parameters and the type of parameters. If the number of parameters are going to resolve the method dynamically during runtime, there is no problem. But if the type of the parameters are varying for the actual parameters and the duplicate parameters that you are passing, then what plays important role is whether the conversion is happening from lower to higher or higher to lower. If it is from lower to higher, it will work, but if it is from higher to lower, it will not work, right? So these are the important things that you need to remember when you're overloading methods. So what is briefly, what is overloading? Overloading is nothing but defining one or two or more methods in a class with same name. So look at the name of the method here for this version. This is area, and even this is also area, but with different type signatures. Means the number of parameters or the type of the parameters are different. So if you look at the first version, it has only one double parameter, whereas the second version has two double parameters. Okay, so this is overloading.